What is up, Generals? We're back with Ultimate General Civil War, and this is the J&P Rebalance Mod, Confederate Major General Let's Play, and we're heading into the Siege of Jacksonville. What I did there is I'm doing kind of a quick click through of the army heading into the battle. I know it's pretty fast. I'm also kind of showing the status of the armory. It's pretty good. So in Siege of Jackson, we're tasked with defending these trench lines outside of, I presume, Jackson. And there's a large Union army about to attack. By and large, you do not want to try and hold those trenches. I have been trying to find a way to hold those trenches, and for the most part, it ends up just being a big mistake. It's very expensive. You're exposed, expensive in terms of manpower. You're exposed on a lot of fronts. You don't have a lot of good visibility to any of the Union units that are attacking, and they can emplace themselves where they can shoot you, and either you can't see them or they're in woods, and there's just not really a great way to hold it. So counterintuitive though it may seem, we're going to retreat some in order to accept the attack on ground more favorable to our cause. It's been a minute since I've released a video. I've been just hammered at work, and I was testing this release of the J&P Rebalance Mod when it was still in its beta form, and I gotta be honest, I got a little burned out, but took some time away from the game just to kind of clear my head and get my heart back into it. And now that I'm back, I gotta say it felt really great to to pick up the campaign right where it left off. I had tried a couple of times at this battle before, but I could tell my heart wasn't really in it, and I wasn't going to have a good time. So apologies for being away. And I used to stick to a pretty rigid schedule, but candidly, when I had that schedule, I was a full-time student, and my only job was being a student. So I had a lot more time, and I think I've complained in a lot of my most recent videos, or not complained, but said, hey, it's been a while since I recorded. Hey, I'm busy at work. Hey, I'm busy at work. I am not the kind of guy that wants that to be the ever-present mantra on my channel. I think that is a thing that we do as a society. We talk about how busy we are at work in order to avoid talking about anything else, I suppose. I'm not going to really try and turn this into some sort of big philosophical discussion about Western society or the dynamics of people, but what I am going to try and do is just say that I don't want that to be my channel. To be what you perceive of me is just whining about being busy at work. I don't want that to be who I am. So what I'm going to say is I am going to do my damnedest to release videos on a fairly regular time frame. And that may or may not be every week. If I get slammed, it might take a minute. And they'll come when they come. But when I tell you guys I'm going to finish a campaign, I mean it. That's another thing. When you say you're going to do a thing, do it. So I'm going to finish the Confederate campaign. And then when that's done, we'll take a look at where we take the channel next. I still think there's a great deal of life in Ultimate General. We'll take a look at what other games are in the Ultimate General series as well. But for the most part, this channel has been about this particular game and just various playthroughs of it. I've enjoyed, I've been kind of off-screen playing a bit of Union play. Goodness gracious, do they play differently? So let's talk a little bit about what's going on screen. And I'll just stop my initial point and just say happy to be back. Looking forward to getting back in the saddle, so to speak. What I've done is I've fallen back from the main objective, and I've put 2 Napoleon batteries on my extreme right. That's because in my perception, that is where the Union has the best path to attack my position directly. They can attack from cover. They're crossing very little creek bed to get to me. And in my previous playthroughs of this battle, I noticed that they had a good, healthy amount of artillery over there. So I'm also moving, I believe it's a Whitworth and maybe a Blakely or two, a battery of Blakeleys or two of them, over to the Confederate right in order to challenge the 3 to 4 batteries of artillery I see over there. Now, there will also be a couple batteries to my south. They outgun me about 150 to my 70. And we have to kind of adjust. There's a secondary consideration with regard to why I'm adjusting my strategy or adjusting my playstyle. And that's that the J&P Rebalance Mod at version 1.27.1 versus 1.26 point whatever I was on, it's just fundamentally a different game. And certain truisms that founded or formed the basis of why I built the army I built that I did no longer work or stand as true. However, I have restarted this campaign enough times that I think it's just better to stick it out. So for the next couple of battles, what will probably happen is you're going to see the Confederate army go through a bit of a reinvention as it kind of adjusts to the new reality that it woke up and found itself in. The most significant change is the rework of many of the cannon and also some of the melee mechanics. So the Union Army here has historically been pretty aggressive in the course of this whole playthrough. So that's not really a giant surprise. Panda and Johnny, but have been working on kind of their advancing of the charge logic or their refinements of the charge logic to ensure that if the AI launches an attack, it doesn't do so kind of in drips and drabs, but rather comes in all at once. Because if you were going to launch an assault, you would not send in your units one at a time. Like, you wouldn't just send in Burr Ridge and, like, just see how it went. And then later send in Bowman and Manter? That's a hell of a name. Manter. Yeah. All right, well, there you go. You'd probably send in, like they're doing here, you'd send in all 3 at once, or ideally you'd send in 4 or 5 or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't be attacking that particular position of my line anyway. It's admittedly that is a unit that is probably the most exposed, but it's still well supported. Anyway, so that's one of the big ones. Melee, just in general, has been reworked. Trenches and fortifications are also getting some love, but they've been getting some love. That's not really a new thing. The big new change is you can't be flanked except from behind. You'll see that I do kind of forget that later in the battle, and I get one of my units flanked from behind with predictable results. Let's put it that way. This is a very, very tough battle for the CSA. You are under attack by a very well-equipped Union army from a number of different sides. And retreating back here, using the trenches that abut that river there, is probably the closest thing you're going to get to a stable position. But as you can see, it's still not great. One of the big worries I have is that there's not really anywhere for me to retreat. And one of the other issues is that this attack on my right, the Union left, towards 49th Texas, 40th Louisiana, etc., it never materializes. So I keep that big 1,800-man brigade, which is 2 brigades merged together that took a lot of damage at Gettysburg. That unit back there is a stopgap. I've also got 13th Florida acting as a stopgap for an attack that never materializes. So I send, you see on the top, I've got the 6th Grenzers. I've got them out there kind of reconning, figuring out, like, is there even a unit over there? Can I scoop up that flank and pick up those batteries? And the answer is no. There's Griffin or Griffith out there, and I'm not going to be able to get there. We also lose a division commander pretty early here. That's very annoying. But it is what it is. Overall, however, the defense is going very well. And by which I mean the counter battery fire is effective at doing its job. The infantry support fire is equally effective at doing its job. And the big weakness in my mind is I don't really have a lot of places to retreat to. So if they were able to get off a successful charge through, let's say, 39th Virginia and 11th Mississippi, if they were to get through that, they basically have a through line straight to my artillery park. And at that point, we're talking about a reroll or, something. They're going to keep launching assaults essentially on the 42nd Black Watch, which, obviously not great. So what I do here is I pull 11th Mississippi back from the front line so that the AI will, for the most part, only charge the 39th VA. And then I have 11th in a refused position in order to kind of provide supporting fire. We also have 10th Field doing some work here, providing flank fire. They're a 2-star battery. So that's one of the things I want to talk about is you'll notice I have infantry support guns, which I don't think I've had this entire campaign. Or if I have, it was experimental in nature, and then I removed them almost immediately. So there were a bevy of changes discussed. I will admit that I forget what they ultimately went with. But one of them is that your smoothbore batteries aren't just basically immediately targeted for AI counter battery fire. It's not that they're not targeted, it's just that they're not the first thing automatically always targeted. And generally, there's a change to the AI logic, and there's also a change to visibility. Some of the batteries picked up some native stealth. So, which I want to say is reduced if they're firing, but don't quote me on these things. I'm sure Panda will in the comments kind of fix it, which is great. So we're in 1863, and I'm happily using Napoleons. I've always been eager to use Blakely's and James's. I've been very happy with those guns in the Confederate arsenal. But, I basically had ignored Napoleons altogether. I had ignored, to maybe my detriment eventually, 24-pound howitzers. Like, they're just not, I never bought them, So I had this huge arm of counter battery, and it was sufficient to the task, in my mind, of counter infantry work as well. That's no longer the case. The Napoleon has received a pretty significant facelift, which makes it a phenomenal jack-of-all-trades gun. You do not want to be using it for counter battery, but it can do it in a pinch. It is a phenomenal, in my opinion, general purpose just field gun. The 3-inch ordnance, or 10-pound ordnance, is a great poor man's counter battery rifle, but was the most commonly used rifle in the war, rifle gun in the war. So again, it's gotten a bit of a facelift. Some of the more dedicated counter battery guns are now really focused on being exclusively good at that, and they're not quite so good at troop support, which is something they used to be quite competent in, and that was sort of why I took only counter battery guns. My perception was that the opportunity cost associated with taking only counter battery guns was effectively nil, and the opportunity cost of taking a infantry support gun was very high. Counter battery guns could effectively counter infantry attacks, and infantry support guns were ineffective to the point of not being worth using in the role at counter battery work. Now, my perception, and the numbers more or less bear this out, is that counter battery guns can shoot infantry and will inflict kills, but are not nearly as devastating as counter infantry in that role. And similarly, counter infantry guns can and will effectively bear down or wear down batteries, but can't do that effectively. And so it's a question of efficacy, not raw ability or raw inability, as the case might be. Turning our attention briefly as to what's happening in the overall flow of the battle, the troops that I spawned with are more or less going to just stand fast and just kind of hold the attack. You can see at the top of the screen that red bar is slowly but surely creeping its way towards the middle, and we're roughly beginning to reach that range of where I would call numeric parity. We're going to get there pretty quick. The new troops here that I spawned in with the exception of was it 13th Florida? Yeah, 13th Florida. They're backstopping, again, against an attack that never materializes. But the 3 or 4 brigades I spawned in with the unit of snipers, they flanked hard to the Confederate left, Union right, routed, I think, 2 batteries of artillery, and then this guy, McGann, or McGinnis, I think it's McGann, he was probably the most nerve-wracking moment of the battle as far as I was concerned, because if he got into the woods, it would be very expensive in terms of manpower and time to morale shock him to such a way that he decided to, get back out of the woods. We caught him before he actually got in the woods, gunned him down, scared him across the river, and that's all she wrote. Bob's your uncle. So what I'm doing now is I'm advancing with infantry, as you can see, across the river. They're eating some canister, but you notice they're not hitting that hard, which this tells me they're probably 10-pound parrots or maybe ordnances. So I wouldn't want them able to advance and get into a counter battery roll anyway. I'm moving them to get in the trenches because of a couple of different things. The trenches provide some melee damage resistance. The trenches allow them to engage those guns probably pretty efficiently. And the trenches will eventually grant me access to that recon eye, which will let me see a lot more what's going on in the Union position. As you can imagine, the objective ultimately is to take back that flag in the center of the map. We've got to do it, I think, before we tick down the next 2 hours in game. So what I'm doing as far as the majority of my troops is blunting as best as possible the Union attack, and then eventually pushing into wiping out the rest of the Union. The troops I capture, it's not many. I capture, I think, 3 brigades. They have Springfield 1863s, so they're very well equipped. This is a very well equipped Union Army. It's almost across the board, 1 or 2 stars. I think one. I see 1 3-star unit in the Army thus far. And I talked before about what I was going to do to try to make Major General interesting or hard. Panda and Johnny have definitely ramped up the difficulty in this edition of the mod. But what I have done still is I've given the Union a 1.1 boost to their size, not their experience or equipment. So whatever the numbers they should get, they're going to get 10% more of that. Here we have an interesting experience with Benton here. He routes through my line. It's very strange. It's a problem, though, because if Benton was able to get on position, he could really quickly become a huge thorn in my side and start just gobbling up whole batteries. So I rapidly send 21st Kentucky back there to try and deal with them. And then now I've got the 9th Repeaters. They're from Virginia. I've got them forward deployed in trenches. And this is actually, I should have had them there from the beginning. And I think I was just probably trying to protect my trench unit or my repeaters. I wanted to preserve that asset. But they basically never stop shooting. Repeaters have worked that way for a while now. But thanks to the way that reloading kind of works in the trenches, they're able to put up just a continuous, never-ending stream of fire. It's awful for the Union that seems to be intent on pushing up this gap, which is just nuts. It's awful terrain for an attack. Awful terrain. They should be attacking my left, or screen left, Confederate right, but they're not. And I think probably it's because I had those troops pulled back, to kind of defend that position. And so the AI thinks like, oh, this is where they're weakest. And my perception is that we're not weak here at all. And you see what I'm doing is I'm kind of using the trenches to leapfrog my units forward to try and gain a little bit of ground. This is a bit gamey, but the AI does it all the time, so I don't really feel all that bad doing it right back. Taste your own medicine and all that. And pretty soon here's when you're going to see me get shot in the back. So that's super fun for all parties involved, except for the guys, in the units. I break off skirmishers from the 41st. I don't want them to be in combat, but I do want them to provide some sort of frontage. They need to fill up these spots in the trenches so that there's no chance that the 1 brigade of Union infantry to my south is able to sneak past me, past my trenches. But we're now definitely to the point where the Confederates have transitioned to offense. Yeah, so the 18th Texas Grenadier Guards, they're being fired on from the rear right now. They were being fired on from the rear in the trenches, and as you can see, their morale shows it, right? And almost immediately, as soon as they turn around, their morale starts to climb back up because they're in good terrain. The Union isn't. And we're able to put fire on them from that direction. We also transition into the offensive from our original position, defending the road, which I presume goes to Jackson. We're pulling troops off of the defenses. We're advancing with some of the cannons. We're preparing to go on the offensive. Attacking directly into those woods by themselves would be maybe foolish. But we're advancing with artillery to provide support, and then we're doing so in an area that we know we've cleared so that my guys can advance safely, so to speak. But this is the cleanest that I've seen in terms of a strategy for this battle. Now, if you try and hold the initial trenches, it is very expensive because like I said, you're attacked from Union troops who are in cover or perhaps even beyond your line of sight. You're attacked on an incredibly wide frontage, so you need to provide defensive troops, and you don't have nearly enough forces to fill all of the you don't have enough forces to fill all of the entrenchments. And so wherever they do decide to attack, you've now got 1 brigade who might have great cover, will have great cover. 1 brigade who will have great cover and will have good damage resistance, but they will still be being shot by whatever they attack with. So 2-3 batteries plus 2 or 3 brigades, shooting or advancing to engage in melee, as the case might be. It's just not great. The unfortunate thing for the Confederate player on this map is that the entrenchments that are screen right are excellent. They're great. And one of the reasons I tried to make this work is because I could just, with detached skirmishers alone, I could hold all of the right, and then I could concentrate, or try to concentrate, my screen right. So abutting that river, Confederate left. I could use just detached skirmishers who are garbage in combat because you don't get perks, they don't, all that kind of stuff. And there's like 30 of them or something. They all you face over there is that 1 brigade and then a unit of cavalry, and then artillery. And artillery shooting at skirmishers in trenches is like just pure waste. I love it. So here's another example of me getting shot in the butt. 14th Arizona leaving trenches because it's being shot at in the rear. But look at the map. We've got the Union hemmed in. The annoying bit is that they're kind of falling into these trees, so we got to find a way to kind of blast them out. And the answer I've got is flanking fire and artillery. Anyway, if you try to hold the trenches, probably hold up until this lip down here because it gives you a recon eye for counter battery fire, and then try the inner ring of trenches. You can see this second inner layer of trenches. The Union can't enter the trenches, but you can. And you can deploy supporting troops on this inner ring to hold. The issue, again, in my mind, is that you're just you're defending too much territory with too few troops, and they're able to attack kind of at their leisure. And the other thing is that if you do that, I mean, look at the rest of this map. There's nowhere else that's really good to defend. There's where I've chosen to make my stand in the back. They're attacking over a river. That's great terrain. But otherwise, there's really not much else. You're going to watch this Cav unit, this Dragoon unit, BB or Babe. They are what I suspect will become, for a little while anyway, one of the major new meta pieces. And I don't have any of them in my army, and it's like really late in the war, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to develop it the way that I want to. And I might use Grenzers to do it, actually. So the big kind of infantry side, love child of this particular expansion of the mod, cannons, I already talked about them. The majority of the line muskets are the same or very similar, very minimal changes for them. But carbines have been given a lot of love. And they've gone from being an entire class of weapon I completely ignore to a really interesting risk-reward decision tree for me as a player. So the first thing is, I believe they and then also smoothbore M42s have been given a bit of a bump to 340 range. So it's still shorter than the 400 of your line infantry rifled musket. But 340 is pretty reasonable, all things considered. It's very close. It's perfectly workable. And the carbines are, I believe, also 340, and with a handful of them being 400. This alone makes them viable. You still have to spend some time walking into someone else's range before you yourself can shoot. But in this game, 60 distance isn't really all that terribly far. And very often engagements occur inside of a unit's maximum range anyway. Now, I'd say 41st Texas or 14th Arizona are probably engaging at maximum range, but 40th Louisiana, 42nd Black Watch, and 10th Georgia are all definitely well inside their maximum range envelope. We've also seen, a lot of us players have seen, that you can sometimes shoot beyond that sort of cone of efficacy that comes outside of your unit. So that range is still a bit wibbly wobbly, to quote the doctor. So I'm like, in my playthrough, the Union playthrough, I was happily deploying brigades with M42s well past Shiloh. I was perfectly content to use an M42. It sometimes meant I had to get up close and personal with some of these units, but they could punch well above their weight class, and they were cheap, and they fired quickly, and they hit hard. This is exactly what I would tend to see from a game design standpoint, or want to see with these kinds of weapons. Now, I don't really know the ballistics of how the actual real-world rifles or muskets performed in the battles. Whatever. It's a game. I have a suspicion smoothbore muskets probably loaded faster, hit harder at close range, but didn't have anything close to the kind of reach of a rifled musket. I've also read repeatedly that all the smoke and confusion and everything else, and the poor marksmanship training across the board, like, fundamentally meant that the quantitative difference between the rifled muskets and the smoothbore muskets did not tend to bear out on the actual battlefield because of conditions not related directly to the ballistic qualities of the muskets in question. So, I don't know, whatever. They did great. I'd also like to add that, again, it's 1863, and I am eagerly deploying Napoleons in my army. I will do this until the end of the war. I will happily run Napoleons. I personally am not convinced of 24-pound howitzers. They got a bit of a range bump, and they hit just as hard as they always have, and they're fantastic. But they're still classed as a heavy weapon, and so I would view them as a very effective defensive-only tool, and really, I think, only useful in a defensive role when I know where the enemy is going to be attacking. If I can't say with some degree of certainty where the action's going to be, I personally, and this is again a me thing, I personally feel that so what I'm doing in the game here is I'm sort of occupying these defensive positions that you're supposed to occupy at the start of the battle. I'm occupying them now as a way of engaging the Union and forcing them back. Because again, the trenches provide excellent cover. They provide both gun damage resistance and also melee damage resistance. And they allow me to engage in melee without actually charging some of these units, because I don't really want to charge because it costs a lot of stamina, and this army isn't built for melee. Melee is very powerful. Cavalry in particular, very powerful, especially with carbines. That's what I was talking about earlier. The dragoons are like great during testing. Bob was really very impressive with the kind of things that he could do with melee cav or carbine cav or both. Bob was doing some of these battles that I'd always considered to be hard, or some of these strategies that I thought to be functionally impossible, and he's just doing them with melee, with supporting carbine cav. It's very, very cool stuff. So, in the next battle or battles, my goal is to probably take the Grenzers or other generic light infantry I have and transform them into carbine infantry, or alternatively start developing a cavalry arm, because cavalry's kind of gone from being useless to amazing. It's still a glass cannon. You still got to be careful. It's still all the truisms in terms of the general application of cavalry haven't meaningfully changed, but the reward for that risk is beginning to feel worth it. And I would argue it clearly is worth it. So yeah, carbines just kind of hit harder. They have a little bit of a risk-reward mechanic from a game design standpoint. I think this is excellent. They require some finesse. They require the player to think carefully about when and how and where they are applied, but you will be rewarded for correct or appropriate implementation of those weapon systems, with a unit that punches dramatically over its weight class. Yeah, at knife fighting range. Yeah, it's not always going to be an opportune time to send your carbine unit in on something, in the way that like a sniper skirm unit is pretty much always applicable or useful. Carbine infantry may not always be as equally useful or applicable. So there's like limitations to that, right? But they can still be functional as scouts. They can still be functional as flankers. They can do all of those roles very well. So we got Griffin here. I'll be completely honest, I should just end the battle now. I don't. I try and like get greedy because I want that kill or that capture. And I think I get it, but like it costs me more men than it's worth. So don't do as I say, not as I do when it comes to this battle. You're holding the center, the battle's worn, the timer's worn off, be done. Call it a win and just pat yourself on the back. This is a hard fight. It's a very hard fight. You go into this thing, and even without me turning the numeric portion of the scaling up, you come into this fight and you're already on the back foot by quite a bit. So, bravo to the battle. I believe the next one coming up is, I always get Chancellorsville and Chickamauga confused, but I'm pretty sure we've already fought Chancellorsville, so that's got to be Chickamauga. It's the jungle fight, basically. Like, it's the whole... What was the meme going around? Like it's Civil War Vietnam. Like yeah, there's just skirmishers everywhere, jungle fighting all the time. This will be a great battle actually to showcase carbine units and all that kind of stuff. I do also think that Grenzers are well and truly dead, which is a real shame. Um, Here they get a charge off that's pretty great. Griffin was white shielded a second ago. The Grenzers have a melee musket, so in that regard, they're on the right track. Griffin, their commander, gets wounded here, so the unit's about to go call it a day. But just look how insanely fast my condition is falling off. I should pull them back, and I should just take the kill, take the win, and call it a day right there. But I'm dumb. I don't. I push too hard. I say I want them, but my guys are very tired too. So there's some of this stuff that you got to watch out for. If you're a unit with melee perks, some of this stuff goes off better. Because my units are just natally faster, or because of the fact that I've been chasing down melee, they probably just by definition of the fact that they're always moving, have a higher base level of stamina or something. So we're closing on the end of the battle. I get this guy, and then as soon as I get him, I just say, okay, cool, we're good. We do like 4,000 some odd casualties, but I've got 10 medicine, so a third of that comes back. We don't capture an awful lot, and we did have a wounded general, but not a dead one. The 2300 M63s are definitely nice. More Spencer carbines are never going to be a problem, or repeaters, I mean. Dudes, money, etc. The career point I put into training probably. Let's find out. Yeah, training, because I really want to go. Like I want to have the nice stats for the rest of the fight, rest of the campaign, so that I can just keep on replacing these units with fresh recruits and maintain my experience level. But this is only viable in my opinion because I have the econ and the logistics and everything to back it up. So we perk up some of these units, figure out kind of what I want to do. Some of these perks have been rebalanced too, so some of the choices I made would have been maybe not ideal. I pick reload speed basically for the Whitworths. I figure they have a long enough range already, and I just want them firing more often. That's my personal desire or what have you. So yeah, they get a bump in manpower, not crazy, and yeah, we are heading into Chickamauga. So I'll be filling out 230 unit core before this battle, and then we'll go from there. Hey, thanks for sticking this out. I'm excited to keep on kind of playing this stuff with you guys. I'll see you in the next one. This is Fiasco. Hope you're having a great time. See you in the next one, and I'll see you on the field.